My name is Annabelle Price. If you looked me up in the system, you'd see a number, a file, a case about defaulted debt and non-compliance with court orders. On paper, I'm a woman who ignored letters, skipped payments, and ended up here because of irresponsibility. What the paper doesn't say is that I never bought a sports car, never gambled away money, never scammed anyone. I didn't steal, I didn't hurt anyone. I planted flowers, trimmed hedges, and tried to build a life out of the little I had. And somehow that life still ended in handcuffs. I used to believe that if you worked hard and stayed kind, you could outrun where you came from. That effort could erase a postcode. That clean hands meant a clean future. Now I know better. Sometimes the mess isn't something you made. Sometimes it's something you inherit without even knowing it, like a surname, or a broken appliance, or a loan you never saw. So this is my story, told from a metal bed in a quiet block where nights are long and days are carved into routines. I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for me. I just want to lay the pieces out, one by one, and see if I can understand how a girl who loved soil and sunlight ended up counting her days in concrete and steel. I grew up in a place called Millstone View. If you're imagining a pretty town with white fences and flowers on windowsills, erase that. Millstone was a cluster of gray apartment blocks on the edge of a closed-down cement factory, where the only view was of broken windows and a smokestack that hadn't breathed in years. The buildings were all the same: chipped stairwells, flickering lights, doors that never quite closed, balconies with more rust than railings. In the courtyard, the grass had given up a long time ago. Children played on dirt and broken asphalt, dodging potholes as if they were craters on the moon. The air always smelled like wet concrete, boiled cabbage, and sometimes gas. A faint hiss in the walls that people got used to, like traffic noise. Grown-ups would talk about it in the stairwell. The pipes are old. The landlord promised to fix it. One day this whole place will blow. They'd laugh after saying it, but it never sounded like a joke. My parents, Lydia and Mark, were Millstone people through and through. Mom woke up at 5 to clean offices in the city and came home smelling like bleach and paper. Dad drove a delivery van when there was work, and when there wasn't, he sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills, rubbing his forehead like he could erase the numbers by touch. They weren't bad people. They were just tired people. People who had learned to live with not enough, as if it were a roommate. We didn't have much, but we had rituals. Mom would bring me home wilted office plants that people had abandoned beside the trash. "Maybe you can save this one," she'd say, placing a crooked spider plant or a yellowing ficus in front of me like a challenge. I'd trim the dead leaves, change the soil in old yogurt cups, and line them on the windowsill of our tiny kitchen. Our view was of another block and a parking lot, but the plants didn't care. They turned toward the light anyway. I loved that about them. Dad used to say, "You've got your mother's stubbornness and your grandfather's hands, workers' hands. That's good. The world can't take that from you." When I was 15, my parents started talking in whispers. They'd shut the kitchen door and leave the TV blaring in the living room so I couldn't hear. But walls in Millstone were thin, and fear travels through them easily. Words floated out anyway. Loan, business, bank, interest. Just until we're on our feet. I heard enough to piece it together. They were tired of cleaning other people's offices and carrying other people's boxes. They wanted something of their own. A small grocery shop near the bus stop where commuters passed every day. "Fresh bread, cheap milk, real coffee," Mom would say, her eyes lighting up in a way I rarely saw. They went to the bank in their best clothes, Dad in his old suit, Mom in a blouse that still had faint iron marks on the sleeves. When they came back, they looked triumphant. Scared, but triumphant. "We're going to make something for you," Dad told me. "So you don't have to live like this." I wanted to believe him. I didn't see the papers they signed. I just saw the hope. The shop opened. It was small, bright, and smelled of bread and cheap detergent. For a while, it felt like we were living someone else's life. Dad came home tired but proud. Mom slept less, smiled more. Customers knew their names. There was a jar on the counter labeled, college for Annabelle, half joke, half desperate wish. But Millstone was full of people like us, counting coins, waiting for payday. Most neighbors still bought on credit from the big supermarket because it was cheaper by the kilo. Delivery trucks for the factory had stopped coming years ago. Now the only constant traffic was debt collectors and buses. The city raised the rent on commercial spaces. The bank called. Winter came and people bought less. Slowly the shelves thinned out. The jar disappeared. My parents stopped talking about when we pay this off and started saying if. I learned early that in poor neighborhoods, dreams don't die with a crash. They die with a slow, grinding sound like a cart dragging a broken wheel. When I turned 18, Millstone felt too small to breathe. I loved my parents, but I hated the air in that apartment, thick with worry, with numbers they never showed me. The gas hissed louder at night. The windows sweated in winter and stuck in summer. I'd fall asleep planning escape routes in my head. I left with a secondhand suitcase, a half-broken phone, and a notebook where I'd drawn gardens I'd never seen. I didn't go far, just to the city near us, the place where the people Mom cleaned for lived. If Millstone was gray, the city center was green and glass. Balconies with flower boxes, courtyards with manicured lawns, squares with trees lit up like fairy tales at Christmas. I took every job I could find: waitress, cleaner, cashier. The one that stuck was at a plant nursery on the edge of town. It was called Green Horizon, which sounded dramatic for a place that sold potting soil and daffodil bulbs, but I loved it anyway. That's where I met Leo. He worked the morning shift, unloading sacks of soil and arranging saplings in tidy rows. He had calloused hands, sun-browned skin, and a way of talking to plants like they were stubborn children. "Drink, you little monsters," he'd murmur as he watered the seedlings. "You're not dying on my watch." We became friends first, then more. Leo rented a tiny attic studio with slanted ceilings and a skylight that leaked when it rained. On weekends, we'd sit on the floor with catalogs from landscaping companies, circling pictures of gardens like kids circling toys at Christmas. "People pay to have someone pull their weeds?" I'd say, half in awe, half in disbelief. "They pay a lot," he'd answer. "They pay to not think about it, to have someone make it pretty." We started small. An old lady from church needed someone to trim her hedge. A businessman wanted someone to mow his lawn and not steal his lawnmower. Word spread. We called ourselves Bright Patch Gardening, wrote the name on a piece of cardboard, and taped it in the window of the nursery. No logo, no website. Just two kids with shears, a shovel, and more energy than sense. It worked. We'd leave Millstone in the dust and step into other worlds. Backyards with fountains, terraces with olive trees, rooftops with herb gardens. We'd come home dirty, exhausted, and completely happy. I thought, this is it. This is how I outrun where I'm from. I didn't know that while I was planting rose bushes for other people, something dangerous was growing back in Millstone. Silent and invisible, hiding in envelopes. The day everything cracked started like any other. We were working in the yard of a big house on the hillside, the kind with stone steps, climbing roses, and a view so wide it made you feel like the world might actually be generous sometimes. I was kneeling under a lilac bush, pulling out stubborn weeds, when my phone buzzed in the pocket of my overalls. Unknown number. Normally, I don't answer those. They're usually people trying to sell you something you can't afford or surveys about things you don't have. But something about the way it buzzed, insistent, almost angry, made me wipe my hands and pick up. "Hello? Is this Annabelle Price?" The voice was male, flat, official. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up. "Yes," I said. "This is the Emergency Services Coordinator for Millstone District. I'm calling about your parents, Lydia and Mark Price." My heartbeat slowed and sped up at the same time. "There's been an incident in your building," he continued. "A gas leak. There was an explosion in the stairwell early this morning. I'm sorry, Miss Price. Your parents were inside their apartment when it happened. They didn't survive." For a second, all I heard was a roaring sound, like someone had put a seashell over my entire head. Gas leak. Exploded. Didn't survive. The words floated in front of me without attaching to anything. I don't remember exactly what I said next. I remember my knees going out. I remember dirt under my nails as my hands hit the ground. I remember Leo's voice, distant and panicked, asking what happened. I remember the man on the phone talking about identification, arrangements, officials. I remember the sentence, "We've secured the site, but your presence will be required for documentation." Documentation. As if my parents had turned into forms that needed signatures. Hours later, I was on a bus to Millstone, the smell of smoke and gas already in my head even though we weren't there yet. The closer we got, the more my childhood came rushing back in flashes. The cracked sidewalk, the graffiti on the walls, Mom humming as she repotted wilted plants for me. When the bus turned the last corner, I saw it. My building. Or what used to be my building. The explosion hadn't blown it apart like in movies, it was worse. The walls were blackened around the third floor. Windows had spiderweb cracks. One corner of the stairwell was missing a chunk, like someone had taken a bite out of it. Fire trucks were gone, but the tape was still there, fluttering in the wind. The air smelled exactly the way I'd imagined as a child whenever someone joked, "One day this place will blow." Gas, burnt plastic, wet ash. I signed forms, answered questions, nodded at strangers who said sorry for your loss in voices that sounded practiced. I identified my parents' belongings, their bodies, their lives, reduced to bags and tags. The funeral was fast and cheap. The city helped, because the explosion was on the news and it looked bad. 2 plain coffins, some flowers. A priest who mispronounced our surname, and then it was over. Everyone told me to take my time, but nobody told me what to do with it. The day after the funeral, I went back to the shell of the apartment with a clearance form in my hand. The building had been partially cleared for access, meaning you could go in, but if it fell on you, it was your problem. Inside, everything was covered in a thin film of gray dust. Plates, chairs, photo frames. My plants on the windowsill were dead, leaves shriveled from heat. The kitchen clock had stopped at 3:17. I told myself I was there to grab a few sentimental things. A photo album, Mom's old recipe book, the scarf Dad wore every winter. What I found instead was a stack of envelopes on the table, same logo, same return address, same neat printed name, to Annabelle Price, not Lydia and Mark. Me. I picked one up. The paper was stiff, expensive. The kind banks use when they want you to feel small. Final notice. My name, account number. Amount due, $100,000. I blinked, shook my head, checked again. There it was. A loan agreement signed 5 years ago. Debtor, Mark and Lydia Price. Cosigner, Annabelle Price. It took a moment for the memory to surface. I was 18, sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers between us. "Just sign here," Dad had said. "It's for your documents. The bank wants to see proof we have a grown child. It'll help us get a better rate. You don't need to worry about it, sweetheart. It's just formality." He'd smiled, nervous, hopeful, already holding the pen out to me. I didn't read the pages. I saw my parents' eyes, heard the word opportunity, felt the old guilt of being a burden. I signed where they pointed. I thought it was about them, not about me. Standing in that ruined kitchen, my signature stared back at me from a photocopy, black and clear in the corner of a legal document I didn't understand. The letters. There were so many. Stacked in messy piles, some unopened, some torn halfway, all marked with dates and words like overdue, urgent, call immediately. I felt cold, even though the apartment was warm from the summer sun pushing through the cracked window. I took one envelope, folded it, and put it in my pocket. Left the others there on the table, as if ignoring them in a different city had somehow built a habit I couldn't break. Later, in Leo's attic, I pulled out the letter and showed it to him. He read it twice, jaw tightening. "They put it in your name," he said quietly. "You co-signed. That makes you responsible now that they're gone." "I didn't borrow anything," I protested, even though it sounded weak in my own ears. I didn't spend a cent. The bank doesn't care about that, he said. They care about signatures and numbers. The amount on the paper might as well have been the distance to the moon. 100,000. It wasn't money to me. It was a sentence. We went to the bank. It felt like walking into a different gravity. Cool air, polished floors, people in suits who smelled like expensive soap and a lack of urgency. A man with a perfect tie and a watch more expensive than my parents' old car sat us down in a glass office. "I'm very sorry for your loss," he said, in the same tone someone might use for, "The system is down at the moment." Then he pointed at the contract. "As co-signer, you are legally obliged to fulfill the remaining repayment conditions," he explained. "Unfortunately, your parents were in arrears even before their passing. There are accumulated interests, late fees." His pen tapped the paper next to the number. It had crawled even higher since the last letter. Over 100,000 now. How is that even possible? I tried to keep my voice steady. They had a small shop. It wasn't a palace. Credit lines, refinancing, partial payments, it adds up, he said, like he was explaining the weather. "I can't pay this," I said. "I'm a gardener. I make just enough to survive. I don't have anything you can take." He smiled, a small mechanical thing that didn't reach his eyes. "We can discuss a payment plan," he offered. "If you start now, in 25 years, we could have it settled with moderate monthly installments." I imagined myself in my 40s, still on my knees pulling weeds in gardens that didn't belong to me, sending every extra cent to a debt for a dream that had blown up, just like the staircase. "I can't," I repeated, because there was no other word. He leaned back, laced his fingers together. "Then I have to inform you, Miss Price, that failure to cooperate or respond to our communications may result in legal action. Property seizures, wage garnishment, and, depending on the judgment, potential criminal proceedings in case of proven deliberate noncompliance." The words washed over me like cold water. Legal action, criminal proceedings. I walked out of that office feeling smaller than one of the seedlings we sold in plastic trays. Leo tried to be calm. "We'll figure it out," he said on the bus home. "We'll talk to someone, a lawyer. Maybe some of it was illegal. Maybe they didn't explain what you were signing. There has to be something." I believed him because I needed to. We didn't have money for fancy lawyers. We barely had money for bills. The jobs we took, mowing lawns, pruning trees, making perfect little flower beds for people who'd never know our names, kept us afloat, but only just. Every month had its own small disasters, the van breaking down, the roof leaking, a client paying late. We told ourselves we were saving for a consultation. "Next month," we'd say, "when we've caught up, when that big job pays." There was always something. In the meantime, the letters followed me. They came to Millstone first. Then, after I filed a change of address so I wouldn't miss bureaucratic things about the accident, they started arriving at Leo's attic. Heavy paper, neat fonts, a logo that made my stomach twist. Sometimes I'd see the envelope in the mailbox and walk straight past, pretending I hadn't. Sometimes I'd take it upstairs and push it into a drawer without opening it. Later, I moved it to another drawer, then a box. "I'll deal with it tomorrow," I'd tell myself. Tomorrow became next week, next month. When I'm less tired. When I'm not about to go to work. When I feel stronger. The box grew heavier. So did my chest. Leo tried to get me to open them. "Running away from paper won't make it disappear," he'd say gently. "Not today," I'd answer, always finding some chore to do. "We have jobs. We're late. I can't think about them and still go smile at customers." Sometimes, late at night, when Leo was asleep, I'd take one envelope out and hold it in my hands, feeling the embossed logo under my thumb. I'd imagine what it said without actually reading it. More threats, more words like final. I'd put it back, heart pounding as if just touching it might set off some alarm. You'd be surprised how much damage pure avoidance can do. The letters didn't care that my parents were dead. that I was still grieving, that I was working 12-hour days with dirt in my hair and pain in my knees. They just kept coming. The day the letter changed color, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. It wasn't white. It wasn't even cream. It was a yellowish, official-looking envelope with a stamp that didn't belong to the bank. Leo found it first. "It's from the court," he said, standing in the doorway with the envelope in his hand. The word court made the air thinner. My first instinct was the same. "Put it on the table. I'll open it later." He didn't move. "Later is why we're here," he said quietly. "You need to see what it says." He was right. I knew he was right. I took it, my fingers suddenly clumsy. Inside was a summons. Plain black text, no apology. "You are hereby notified. Proceedings regarding unpaid loan. Mandatory appearance on. Failure to appear may result in..." My eyes skipped over lines, catching on fragments. "Prosecutable offense. Willful neglect. Previous communications unanswered." I sank onto the bed. "I never meant to ignore them," I whispered. "I just couldn't handle it." The paper didn't care about couldn't handle. It only cared about didn't. We asked around about lawyers. The numbers people threw at us might as well have been phone numbers to Mars. Consultation fees, hourly rates, retainers. "We can't afford that," Leo said, brows furrowing. "There's legal aid," someone at the community center suggested. "You can apply for a state-appointed lawyer." So I did. Weeks passed. A letter came informing me that a public defender had been assigned to my case. No name, just a reference number and a line about limited resources and prioritization. The first time I actually met him was 20 minutes before the hearing. He was young, thin, with ink stains on his fingers and tired eyes that had seen too many cases that all blurred into one. "I've read your file," he said, shuffling through a stack of papers as we sat on a bench outside the courtroom. "Your parents took the loan. You co-signed, they defaulted, bank made multiple attempts to contact you, you didn't respond. Now they're asking for a criminal penalty for deliberate non-cooperation, plus the civil enforcement of the debt." "It wasn't deliberate," I said. "I just panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I didn't open them yet, I could wait until I was ready." He nodded, but his eyes were on the clock. "We'll tell the judge you're cooperative now, that you work, that you intend to pay, that you were dealing with trauma from the accident. It might help." "Might?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough for me to feel it. "The bank has strong documentation," he said, "and the law around co-signers is very clear. I can try to argue for a suspended sentence or community service, but I can't promise anything." He didn't ask for my story beyond the facts. He didn't ask about Millstone, or the gas, or the box of letters I couldn't bring myself to open. He had 20 minutes and a stack of files. I was one of many. Inside the courtroom, everything felt staged. The judge in his robe, the clerk with their monotone voice, the bank's lawyer in a suit that fit too well, the tiny corner for defendants where I stood feeling like I'd stumbled into a theater performance where everyone knew their lines but me. The bank's side laid it out like a simple equation: co-signer, default, repeated notices, failure to respond, refusal to cooperate. They said I had willfully avoided engagement, that I benefited from the loan because it was used to start a family business. They called my silence calculated. There was nothing calculated about it. It was pure fear. But fear doesn't translate well in legal language. My lawyer spoke about my age when I signed, about grief, about my low income, about my efforts to work. He said the word gardener like it was a small, fragile thing. At one point, the judge looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Miss Price, do you understand your obligations when you sign a financial contract?" he asked. I didn't back then, I answered honestly. Nobody explained it. They just said I was helping my parents. "And now?" he pressed. "Now I understand too late." It was the truest thing I'd said all day. They sent us out while the judge considered. There's a particular kind of silence in a courthouse corridor. It's heavy, like everyone is holding their breath at once. I could hear the ticking of the clock at the end of the hall, each second stretching longer than the last. When they called us back in, my lawyer gave me a quick, practiced look. Half apology, half resignation. The judge read from a paper, his voice steady. Financial judgment in favor of the bank. Full amount to be repaid. Recognition of criminal liability for repeated non-compliance with official notices and court orders. Sentence, 18 months of custodial time with possibility of parole after 12, plus a schedule for wage garnishment upon release. The words seemed to float above my head for a while before they sank in. Custodial time, prison. For letters I couldn't bear to open. I remember Leo's face in the back row, pale, jaw clenched, eyes shining. I remember wanting to go to him, to say, "It's fine, I'll fix it. We fixed everything so far." Even as my legs wouldn't move. 2 officers came to stand on either side of me. The cuffs were cold on my wrists, just like they are now. That was the moment my life split in two, before the judge said 18 months and after. Prison doesn't smell the way you think it does. It smells like disinfectant, cheap coffee, damp towels, and, strangely, sometimes shampoo, the industrial kind they give in plastic bottles with no label. It smells like boredom and tension and people trying to pretend they're fine. My cell is small, bed, shelf, toilet, a metal table bolted to the floor. I share it with a woman named Kira who snores like a freight train but gives good advice in the mornings. The first nights, I didn't sleep. The door closing with a heavy clang, the checks with flashlights, the distant murmurs. It all felt like a punishment that seeped into my skin. I kept thinking, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not like the others. Then I started talking to the others. There's Marta, who forged signatures because her boss told her to and took the fall when it all went wrong. There's Lena, who got into a fight defending her sister and the opponent hit the ground harder than anyone expected. There's a woman in her 60s everyone calls Auntie who failed to pay taxes for a tiny market stall and ended up here through a maze of bureaucracy she still doesn't fully understand. None of them fit the picture of criminal they show on TV. Most of them fit the picture of tired. We work. I got assigned to the greenhouse program after they saw gardener on my file. At first I thought someone was mocking me. Then I saw it. Behind the main yard, inside a fenced area, a large plastic tunnel full of tables, soil, and rows of seedlings under lamps. We grow herbs, vegetables, and sometimes flowers. They go to the prison kitchen, to community projects, to little city planters with plaques that say, "Donated by the rehabilitation program." The first time I pressed my fingers into the soil there, I almost cried. I'd missed the weight of a trowel, the coolness of damp earth. Here, inside a place where everything is controlled and counted, watching something grow freely feels like a small rebellion. Plants don't care about your file, your charges, your sentence. They care about water, light, and whether you show up. So I show up. Every morning at 7, we walk from the block to the greenhouse in a slow line, 2 by 2, supervised by officers who pretend not to notice when someone stops to tilt their face toward the sun for a second longer than allowed. We water, we repot, we talk quietly. Sometimes I tell Kira which flowers survive winter best. She tells me about her daughters, who are living with their grandmother and who send her drawings with suns that take up the whole page. In the evenings, after head count, I sit on my bed and write. At first, it was just numbers. How many days until parole? How many letters from Leo? How many euros I've earned in the greenhouse job that go into an account I can't touch yet? Then, slowly, it became more. I started writing my story. Not for a judge, not for a bank, but for me. For the girl who signed papers she didn't understand. For the young woman who hid letters in a box because fear was louder than reason. For the version of myself who thought ignoring something would keep it from growing teeth. Leo visits when he can. He sits on the other side of the table in the visiting room, hands folded, eyes tired but determined. He kept Bright Patch Gardening going. He does small jobs now, mostly, but he sends me pictures. A balcony we once planted together, now covered in blooms. A community garden he volunteers at on Sundays. "I kept your name on the flyers," he told me once. "You're still half this thing. You're just on pause." We don't always talk about the future. Some days it's too heavy to make promises when you're sitting in a room filled with guards and cameras. Instead, we talk about the present. "How's the rosemary?" he'll ask. "Stubborn," I'll answer. Like me, keeps trying to take over the whole bed. Sometimes we sit in silence, holding the phone receivers, just looking at each other through the plexiglass. That's its own kind of conversation. The bank still sends letters, I'm sure. Somewhere in a drawer, there's a file with my name on it, numbers going up and down, plans for how to take what little I'll have when I leave. But here, in this strange little bubble of time, I've learned something important. I can't change that I signed. I can't change that I froze. I can't change that the system cares more about signatures than circumstances. But I can change how I walk out of here.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for more love, betrayal, and redemption tales.